Hey everyone, welcome to a celebratory episode of the Dan and Joe Sports Show. As always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.
All right, Joe, sitting here. Today's the day that Ole Miss has won their first national championship in one of the big three sports since 1962, I believe, when they won the football national championship with old Johnny Vaught at the helm. And just a magical into the season for Ole Miss and Coach Bianco getting his first national championship. Sitting here right now, drinking the Kool-Aid. Everything's just going really good. And what an amazing win. They swept Oklahoma in the championship series. And, there's so many things to say. I mean, they went from first to worst, back to first. Don't know if I've ever seen that before.
Yeah, Dan, we said here today, I'm still just, in shock to a large degree. I can't believe it. I know we'll talk more about it later as far as how the day transpired, but I really kind of fully expected we'd be in store for a game 2 or a game 3 tomorrow night.
I thought so too. And I mean, the way the game went for most of it, I thought we were heading to a game 3. Oklahoma came out playing well like we knew they would. The pitching was excellent from their ace, Cade. He came out and was really, pitched. He struck out 13 players and actually set the record for a championship series. I believe the record was done by a Florida pitcher against LSU back in that 2017 All SEC championship. And sadly, the guy does it in a losing effort. But Joe, I believe you were telling me earlier that Cade was almost an Ole Miss Rebel, right?
Yes, he was a former Ole Miss commit. Ole Miss lost that recruiting battle to Oklahoma. And I was afraid that he was going to spearhead Oklahoma to come back and win the finals and maybe steal in the process the MVP from Volusia.
Yeah, definitely like that was possible because, I mean, he was pitching an excellent game. The only thing that he had the entire game was that one-run homer that Jacob Gonzalez had in the 6th inning that was huge because there had been nothing else. I mean, I think we maybe had like one other hit the entire game. And Gonzalez was a real story, I thought, in the College World Series with the way he played today because he had a little bit of a rough series, I think, leading up to now. And he comes out, he gets that home run. And not only that, he gets the big hit in the 8th inning when we were down 2-1 to tie the game at 2-2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he really did. A guy that's a top prospect for next year's draft, but it had some underwhelming moments throughout the season where his batting average dropped about 70 or 80 points compared to where it was last year. And he had some defensive miscues, but he stepped up today when it mattered most and just had a great offensive game.
That's right, Joe. And then I think the other hero that kind of emerged from the ashes to an extent was TJ McCants. He's a guy who didn't play a lot during the regular season. He came in with a lot of hype as someone that maybe could be a high round draft pick in the future. And this season, I mean, I don't know whether it was maybe he was in Coach Bianco's doghouse, the injury that he had. He never really quite had the season that we thought he would have. But here in the last 2 days, of course, he gets the home run that started the back-to-back-to-back home runs train that we had last night that really put that game out of reach. And then today he comes in and he gets a big hit as being the first one to get on base before Gonzalez locks him in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very timely from him. Yeah, coming into the season, I think there was maybe talk that he could even be a guy, that might bat at the top of the order, and play center field. And for him to be kind of demoted from the starting lineup for large stretches of, the end of the season and the postseason due to injuries as well, for him to make those strides and have a huge game the last 2 nights was definitely highly impactful.
And Joe, I mean, Tim Elko right now is the hero of all of this sports. I think they need a statue outside of the stadium, outside of Swayze Field, of Tim Elko. And, I kind of think that maybe for a sport, you think of college football, I think of the most revered football figure being Tim Tebow, I think in a lot of ways. I mean, I know everyone talks about Herschel Walker, Bo Jackson, but I think when you look at the way the program views this one player, I kind of feel like Florida's enamorment with Tim Tebow. I kind of think that you're seeing a little bit of that now with Tim Elko with Ole Miss fans. And I kind of think he's almost a player in the same vein, especially him coming back from that injury he had, being the catalyst for this team that got so down low into the SEC, not making the NCAA tournament, and then spurring this comeback And it's because him. It's because he came back.
Yeah, it really is, Dan. It's such a storybook career because I think I was telling you before the show, we were talking, his legacy was cemented largely even if he had not played this season. You know, we were kind of wondering last year if he was even going to get an extra year of eligibility because last year he built up his legacy so much playing with that torn ACL. And then this year he comes back and hits 24 home runs this year. And then obviously, you know, the leader, the captain for a national championship team that was such, you know, surprising run. And so all those factors, I think about some of the all-time greats in Ole Miss baseball. A lot of people for years have talked about the heroics of Drew Pomeranz about 10 or 12 years ago. He's played in the major leagues. David DeLucia works for SEC Network's big one. Zach Cozart was a good shortstop for Ole Miss, also played with the Cincinnati Reds. But Ole Miss, you know, hasn't really had too many like superstar MLB players. And so you add that into the factor that Elko's the guy that's kind of the poster child for the national championship team. Yeah, I think that he's right up there. I think you said one time that he could be right after Eli Manning, maybe with Ole Miss sports lore almost.
You know, I kind of feel like they should have a street in Oxford now called Elko Avenue. You got you know, Manning Way and all those kind of things. I think Elko Avenue would be awesome, and have that be the street that leads up to the baseball field.
You should. I mean, he has the national championship, and then Mike Bianco. You know, suddenly, you know, he definitely deserves some more recognition too. You know, as the coach.
Absolutely. When you think about it, he's been the coach for 22 years. He built this program steadily, and he'd accomplished everything. It was a stepping stone: winning the SEC West, winning the SEC regular season, winning at Hoover, you know, hosting a regional, hosting a super regional, winning a regional, winning a super regional. He had accomplished all these various things in the, you know, being the number one overall seed. He had done stuff like this. The only thing he had never done was win a national championship. And Joe, I think you and I talked about it, that the last time he had gone to Omaha in 2014, it was a team that was a lot like this one. It was a team that, you know, maybe had underperformed a little bit based on what they were expecting. They didn't get to host their own super regional. They had to go to a super regional and win against a Conference USA opponent, ironically. You know, this time it was Southern Miss. Last time it was Louisiana Lafayette. And kind of a similar type story, except last time, of course, they didn't get it done. I think they won one game. And then this time go out and you're champions with only losing one very close decision to Arkansas.
Yeah. I mean, a couple of parallels there. I think about like the road in both 2014 and 2022 involved them going through some really tough teams to get there. In 2014, they went through Washington, who was a really good team, the Oxford Regional, played 2 close games with them. And then Lafayette was a team that was ranked number 1 during that season at one point, national seed. And then this year, you go through another national seed in Miami, which I really think Miami's kicking themselves now. They're like, you know, we played toe-to-toe with this team. And I think in the game against Miami, Dan, Miami was up 1-0 for the longest time in that game. And it was a Tim Elko double in like the 7th inning with 2 outs that gave Ole Miss both of their runs to beat Miami 2-1 and then go on to win the regional. And so Miami was right there with Ole Miss. And then you go to the Hattiesburg regional or super regional, where Southern Miss had one of the best pitching staffs in the country. In fact, you kind of look at how the Oklahoma pitcher looked today. I mean, Southern Miss's starters had similar success. Like one of their pitchers, Waldrop, he had 12 strikeouts against Ole Miss and still lost. Mm-hmm. And so Ole Miss just repeatedly through the earlier rounds and then going on to the College World Series, they were in these just pitching duels where the other team like did pretty well, but Ole Miss just did better. Like their pitchers were better at times at key moments. They got timely hits and they just won games, Dan, that Ole Miss traditionally loses.
That's right, Joe. I mean, you think about the game today. Cade came out and pitched epic. The closing game to beat Arkansas. I mean, DeLucia got into an epic pitching battle with Norton, the ace of Arkansas, and DeLucia went the full 9. I mean, what a hero performance he had. Getting the name the tournament player of the year, he deserved it because I mean, right there, Arkansas, I think, ultimately ended to prove to be the greatest opponent that Ole Miss had to play. And I think ultimately ended up being the second best team in the tournament. And it took a hero effort by DeLucia doing a complete game shutout for them to get that win and win 2-0 against an Arkansas pitcher who had himself quite the game himself.
Yeah, I was so impressed by that. And to me, it was so unexpected because I was really worried after Wednesday night's loss to Arkansas, the way they lost in the ninth inning. I just didn't know that Ole Miss could come back from that. And I don't think Ole Miss teams of yesteryear would have. Like, that just wouldn't have happened. But, like, you had DeLucia. And also, Dan, I noticed a mindset change with this team. Like, I heard Bianco talk about how he was having fewer meetings with the players. Like, he didn't want to mess anything up. He kind of just let them operate themselves. And he kind of had the mindset going into Thursday's game. He's like, we're not going to look at this like, oh, woe is me, we lost that game. We're going to look at it like, if you had told us we have one game to get to the finals at the beginning of the season, sign me up. And that's how they embraced it. And they really approached every game in this postseason like they were playing with house money.
Yeah, they really did because, I mean, they got into the last second. They were the last team in. It was a great sign of the game today. Last team in, last team out, natty. That just really kind of summed it up. And this team, they knew that they had underachieved throughout the season. At the very end, they picked it up. And when they got in, it was almost like the season had reset for them. And they remembered how they got to be the number one team. And they just showed it. They went out every day. No one expected them to do anything. And they just kept out-toughing teams, getting great hits. The batting was so amazing. But then really, at the end, it was the pitching that every single time came in and was shutting out people and just having great performances. I mean, you look at they go in and DeLucia gives up 1 run versus Auburn in the first game of the College World Series. An Auburn team that had been, that broke the all-time record for scoring runs in a regional, and he only gives up 1 hit, and I think it was a home run. And that was the only thing that happened in the entire game right there. And then you see what he does against Arkansas, gets that complete game shutout against just an excellent hitting team in Arkansas. And, I mean, It turns out that the ultimate decision that turned around Ole Miss's season was bringing DeLucia out from the bullpen and making him your ace.
Yeah, you moved him to the Friday night starting role. And then Hunter Elliott wasn't in the starting lineup at the beginning of the season. And he becomes the second starter, Saturday starter, in the stretch run, performed great. Derek Diamond, was previously the Friday night guy to start the season. And, he just wasn't pitching much at the end, which is so ironic. John Gaddis was another guy at one point, was the Friday night starter, kind of like when they were kind of shuffling guys back in February and March. But he still, stepped up when he needed to, got the win, today, which was key. And so I think I look back at this season, Dan, and just see a lot of people stepping up and knowing their role on the team. And then just kind of the timeliness of everything. I feel like offensively, the team got a lot of timely hits. Like I saw a lot of 2-out hits that were executed throughout the postseason. But I liked what you said in reference to the last in, last out. I almost wonder if that would be a fitting name for a 30 for 30 for this team. Last in, last out.
I think so. I don't think there's any doubt they're going to make a 30 for 30 about this team, especially when you add in the additional layer of the fact that Mississippi State won it last year for their first championship. And then you have a state in Mississippi that's just so baseball crazy when it comes to Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Southern Miss. And, you almost like wonder to yourself, could it be possible that Southern Miss can win it next year and just complete the trifecta of it?
Yeah. I mean, that's what, we feel like we're in store for. And, you think about both fan bases, how much they love their college baseball. Obviously, Southern Miss does too. I feel like, you got to feel good, for both fan bases because, for years, there was always kind of that mantra that both were kind of snake bitten when it came to all major sports. And it just wasn't meant to be like, it'd almost be like the brunt of a joke. And I feel like you couldn't have had 2 more deserving fan bases on the Power 5 level.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they both wanted it so desperately. And you could even see it like in Omaha when you saw that 4 out of every 5 fans at the game today were Ole Miss fans. You look at even the things like the Rocco's Jello Shot Challenge, where Ole Miss ended up having 12,000 Jello shots compared to like Arkansas fans buying the second most at 8,000. They came to Omaha because they cared that much. And I think, just the will that this program had and the fan base had kind of like pushed them through, and they just wanted it more than everybody else.
They did. And I really think having that crowd was impactful. I think that there were times when it rattled the Oklahoma pitchers, like you saw, today, how things played out in the eighth inning. Like having that type of crowd was a big factor in just having, the team just so calm, so relaxed. They've had many years over the Mike Bianco tenure. And I think he talked about this in his interview at the end. They've had many teams that were definitely capable of making an Omaha run, but just so many times, Dan, there was the what ifs, I think everybody talked about one year in particular, 2005. They lost a super regional to Texas in Oxford after winning the first game. And then Texas goes on to win the national title. And that was always kind of looked at as one of those, what if seasons. Like that was one of our best teams and we didn't win the whole thing. And so this team, was probably not the most talented Ole Miss team, but kind of similar to Mississippi State last year. It was just an opportunistic team that kind of just caught lightning in the bottle.
Yeah, Joe, and you got to think too, like last year was a very good Ole Miss team that didn't quite get there. They went out to Arizona and they had the 3-game series where they lost to Arizona, and it propelled the Arizona coach to being the new LSU coach. Well, I think one of the critical moments of this entire tournament came early when Ole Miss got their chance at redemption against that Arizona team last year that had knocked them out, and they killed them. They put up 22 runs against them and just completely obliterated all memories of last year. And I felt like that was kind of like an absolving moment for this Ole Miss team to really have belief going into the future, because that's the team that took you out last year and you destroyed them.
Yeah, you think about that team, and you also think about their former coach, Jay Johnson, now at LSU, and had LSU hired Mike Bianco, how things were going to be so different. And because they didn't, there was so much immense pressure, even extra, on Mike Bianco this year. Like I heard so much about it being Omaha or bust. And then, it seemed like the writing was on the wall that Bianco was probably going to be out as the head coach if they didn't make the tournament or lost in the regional round. And he just, went all the way. And it wasn't just Omaha or bust. He's like, let's just go ahead and win the whole thing.
Yeah, and I mean, what an impressive job by him to do that, in the backdrop of all this. And that LSU right now is just kicking themselves thinking like, we had the chance to get this guy who played baseball here, who began his coaching career here, and we didn't get him. And now you're never going to get him because he just won this national championship, and he's a lifer now, I think, at Ole Miss until he's ready to hang it up. And I think it's a great story because, I think this can be, I know that it was LSU's decision not to go with him, but I think this could be a great story for future people who have this opportunity. Someone like a Dabo Sweeney, whenever Nick Saban retires, where if you've built something great, I know the lure of going back home when mama comes calling is really intense and it's a strong pull. But if you stay where you are, sometimes it's the better thing. And I think, Bianco got that chance to stay where he was at, and now he's a national championship coach.
Yeah, and everything, like you said, alluded to, everything that he has in Oxford, he kind of built from the ground up. He was kind of his own worst enemy when it came to the level of expectations because he had been to so many super regionals for a while without going to the College World Series. Then the last few years, they kept losing in the super regional round again. And so it was great, to see him break through. And yeah, I mean, if you're LSU, definitely you wonder what if. But if you're Ole Miss, you're glad that he stayed this extra year.
Absolutely. And, you're glad that you had so many great players come back for one more year. Tim Elko, Kevin Graham, all these guys really led what was a team that has got a lot of youth to it, but at the most important place has had some really fantastic leadership.
Yeah, they did. There's some great seniors on the team. Perfect blend of a lot of star power in seniors, and then just a pitching staff that I don't think I've ever seen it before, Dan, in baseball, where you see two starters that just were nowhere close to the rotation early in the season becoming, not only the starters, but like so dependable.
Absolutely. I mean, in the end, DeLucia was the best pitcher in all of college baseball. He was the best one at the tournament, and he's a guy that wasn't in the starting rotation earlier the season. Mason, Hunter Elliott suddenly turns into the best freshman pitcher in America, and he's a guy who wasn't, sniffing the rotation earlier in the year. And something that I really like, I'm excited about moving forward is you may not get DeLucia back, but the young talent they have in the pitching room with Hunter Elliott, with Mason Nichols, who I thought did a very good job. Didn't have a great outing today, but I thought over the tournament way exceeded the expectations you would have for a freshman. I think there's a lot of, and then Dougherty being a sophomore, I thought he had some really good outings, especially yesterday. You should feel really good about where the Ole Miss baseball program is heading with pitching in the coming years. There's a lot of good young pitchers on this team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I read reports yesterday that they've picked up, while they were in Omaha, a transfer from Florida who's going to commit for next year and could be part of the rotation. And that this had to have done wonders for their recruiting with all the exposure on ESPN and winning the national title, kind of becoming, officially a national brand if they weren't already in college baseball. Yeah, so it just does so much for the program, and really fascinated to see where it goes from here.
Absolutely, Joe. I mean, this is definitely, he's going to be able to build off this. I think the recruiting is going to go up. And I think the atmosphere that you saw in Omaha, the passion of the fan base, the way the players seem to get along. And I thought Bianco just did a great job representing himself in this university throughout this. It's only going to get better, I think, because I think that it's going to be very easy to recruit to Ole Miss moving forward. And the last thing that I would say on the recruiting standpoint is what I really like about Bianco throughout this, and what I think is going to help him continue to get high level pitchers, and maybe even some that he wouldn't have gotten in the past, was the way that he let pitchers complete games when they played good. I mean, you saw DeLucia do multiple complete games, and they did, of course, the biggest one being the one against Arkansas when he had some issues. He had some jams, but he pitched well enough that Bianco let him do it. And I think that, if you got an ace that's looking to be a first round draft pick, doesn't he want to show off his stuff and show that he can finish games? And I think that Bianco showed that he's a coach that'll let you do that.
Yes. And he's so involved with the pitchers' development and the catchers. He calls the pitches. A lot of head coaches don't do that in college baseball. And I think former catchers, make great head coaches. It's like a prime position for future great head coaches, in my opinion, not just on the college, but also the professional level. But going back to what you said about the atmosphere next year and what, this does for the program, I feel like so many of those super regionals that Ole Miss hosted in the past, they'd have 10 or 12,000 people at Swayze Field. But a lot of times, Dan, it was kind of a nervous energy. It was like kind of waiting for something inevitably bad to happen. And now that you finally got that elusive national championship, we're celebrating that tonight, I don't think there's going to be that same undertone of anxiety in the crowd at Swayze. I think there's going to be like some comments and just people just kind of getting raucous. And I think that actually may make the home field advantage even a little bit better.
And that's a good point, Joe. I mean, you're right. I feel like in the past, it's always been, when's the other shoe going to fall? We're playing Tennessee Tech. Oh, no, we're going to lose. And we that shocked that it was Tennessee Tech that beat us. No, we're not. Now I feel like you got that winner's mindset. You saw them go through the gauntlet, go through Arkansas, Arizona, Miami, Auburn, all these really good baseball teams this year to finish the deal. And, I mean, especially coming from like such a place where they had gone so down low just to barely get in. I think this is going to be a lot of confidence moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just still can't believe it, man, that we're talking about Ole Miss baseball as the national champions, and not something I think I ever would have considered, since we've known each other, and really, especially this year, the way things played out.
Absolutely, Joe. I mean, it's funny. Like I went to a game earlier this year. I went to the Auburn Ole Miss series at Auburn. I went to a game, and I think Ole Miss won something like 15-5 or something. It was a big beatdown. And that time, Ole Miss was the number one team. And it entered my mind briefly. I was like, wow, this Ole Miss team looks really good. Maybe this could be the one team that Bianco has that wins a national championship. Maybe I saw the national championship team. And then the very next week against Tennessee, it unraveled, and Tennessee kind of, succeeded their place. And then now I'm sitting here today and they won the national championship. And it was cool to say that I saw that national championship team in person. at the top of their rise before they fell out, before they rose up again. So just a great story.
Yeah, absolutely. And you remember 2 years ago when the season was cut short, I think they finished number 1 that year. And Bianco was like coach of the year that year, but it was like, such a hollow feeling. And so it definitely nice, to be on the other end now.
That's right, Joe. And speaking of hollow feelings, we have a couple of programs that made it close to winning a national championship in the SEC this year, but then didn't get it done. And you look at Arkansas now. I mean, they've made the finals a couple times. Of course, they had the drop ball that lost them a national championship against Oregon State. Mm-hmm. And they really, I think they were, you had to consider them a heavy favorite in that game 3 against Ole Miss, especially the way they won that game too. Didn't quite get there. And you wonder, I had picked Arkansas to win this tournament from the get-go. From day one, I thought Arkansas was the team that was going to win the national championship this year. Are they still going to be able to get back to this level, or is maybe Dave Van Horn going to end up being the next Mike Martin, that's someone that makes College World Series all the time but never can quite win the championship?
It's going to be tough. I mean, I want to think he'll eventually break the seal. They'll have a great team again next year. That great defense, and also Hagen Smith, their freshman who started the second game against Ole Miss. Yeah, I think he's a budding superstar. He'll be back next year for the rotation. So I want to say, they'll eventually win, but, at the same time, there's over 300 teams in Division I baseball. And it kind of seems like, Dan, there's a theme that we've talked about before where just kind of getting hot at the right time, not winning your conference tournament's the way to go. And so, it's just so unpredictable.
It is. I mean, you almost feel like maybe the next team that could win a national championship in baseball from the SEC could either be a team like Auburn or Texas A&M. Butch Thompson's really slowly building this Auburn program, and it's gone from steps. It's gone from making a regional, making a super regional, losing the super regional in a close one, finally making the College World Series, getting knocked out in 2. Then this year they won a game. They beat Stanford, which was the number 2 overall seed. And he's done it with teams and not a lot of people expected a lot of. And he's got some good returning pitching. And you could look for it being a team like that. Or you could look at what Jim Schlossnagle has done at Texas A&M, and in his first season got them the number 5 overall team and got them within a couple games of making the College World Series final. And so you almost wonder, is it going to be not Arkansas that's the team that hasn't won one yet that wins one? Is it either Auburn or Texas A&M?
Yeah, both of those teams have really good chances too.
Yeah, I think so. And, the other team that we look back on that didn't do it is Tennessee. I mean, maybe the thing that more than anything else got Ole Miss this championship is the fact they didn't have to take on that ridiculously loaded Tennessee team. And Notre Dame did everyone a massive favor because that Tennessee team was amazing. But, yet again, it shows that maybe you don't want to be the number 1 overall seed going into the playoffs.
You don't, Dan. And I've talked about it before. In baseball, the season's so long, there's so many games, you just got to pace yourself. It's not like the best team automatically gets to the finals. You got to go through the tournament. And the only way you're going to do that is if you want to win every game, but you just can't overwork your team. And I would advise Tennessee going forward that if they want to win the national title next year, and, they still could be a favorite next year, they definitely need to pace themselves and not overwork their pitchers, especially.
They need not overwork their pitchers and maybe be a little bit more humble too. I mean, they got a little bit of a brash thing, and that's okay. But I kind of felt like eventually when you play that kind of style, it's going to work against you if you're not thick-skinned enough. And I think they showed that at some point where they really let Notre Dame get to them. And they were obviously a better baseball team than Notre Dame, but, they couldn't handle the enormity of the moment when things started going bad for them.
Yeah, you can't play with that edge for an entire season. You might be able to throw that together for a playoff run, but you can't do that from February to June.
Right. Well, but, coming out of it, Ole Miss ended up being the hottest team, and that's why they got it done. And, really one of the most amazing national championships we've ever seen in any sport. And, following it up after what Mississippi State did. And it's amazing how you see this, because it makes me think of when I was a senior in college at Auburn and we won our 2010 football championship. It was the year after Alabama had won their first national championship in 2009 since 1992, which is a very long, period of time in Alabama football history. And Auburn followed it up by winning the national championship. And a lot of times I feel like if you're a program that's maybe close to getting it done, when your rival gets that championship and you have to sit there and watch it, it motivates you to get it done yourself.
Yeah. Also think of Kentucky and Louisville, going back to back in 12 and 13. Definitely, ironic to see that. And I heard Hunter Elliott talking about that today in an interview segment that they showed during the game, that motivated them last year when State won it.
That's right. Well, Joe, before we have our next shows, we're going to have to get ourselves some Omaha gear so we can rep it. And really just, I'm glad that this got to happen for Ole Miss. A great thing for the university, for the athletic program, and Hotty Toddy.
Hotty Toddy.
All right. And when we come back, we're going to talk about something that's not so great for the Ole Miss athletic program, and that's Arch Manning's recent commitment to Texas. And I want to thank all of our listeners, especially those that are in Omaha or Oxford, Mississippi, or anyone that's cheering for Ole Miss today. You can check out all of our episodes on YouTube. You can also subscribe to our channel. You can also get on Spotify and catch a lot of our episodes on there. And you can also like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at DJ Sports Show. And as always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.